Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending, and happy St. David's Day. Before we start, I'd like to say today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by way of the Council's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to be filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Proposed public speakers have been made aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to this meeting. With members, please use their microphone to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphone when you have finished. Members dialing in remotely, please only turn on your camera when you wish to speak, and please remember to switch it off when you have finished. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the committee, and then that any devices are switched off. We try to do now. It isn't. Okay. Okay, thank you. Do we have any? We have apologies from John Reynolds. There's no other apologies, I take it? No? Does anybody have any declarations of interest? Okay, no. The minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of February are on page 3. Has everybody received a copy? Yes? And are there any matters arising from their minutes? And can somebody propose their true record, please? Second. Thank you very much. We'll go straight on to item number 1. There is a late representation papers. Everybody received that? Okay, thank you. I'll hand over to Grant for application number 220848.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So this application is retrospective planning permission for the change of use from offices and self-contained flat to a hostel for 8 persons. The recommendation is that the application is granted with conditions, and the application initially started as a delegated item but was called to planning committee at the request of councillors Townsend and Horheim. So, in terms of the site context, the application site is outlined in red here. It's a 3-storey end-of-terraced bay-fronted property that fronts onto Cullion Road, and the side elevation overlooks Morden Road. So it's on the corner of the junction here. Morden Road is a one-way street that exits onto Cullion Road, and Cullion Road, as you'll be aware, is one of the main vehicular routes into the city centre from the M4 motorway. So, in terms of the aerial view, just to give a bit more of a context to the site, we have the Cullion Road district centre broadly on the opposite side of Cullion Road here, and then we've got more of a residential context of Morden Road, Somerset Road, Annesley Road. So, overall, the sort of character of the area is quite mixed. It's not, just residential or just commercial. There's quite a blend of commercial and residential uses. So these are some site photos of the property in question. So as you can see, it's sort of a typical residential property, 3 stories on the corner of the junction there as described. This is looking back down Cullion Road, so towards the M4 motorway away from town. The property is on the right-hand side here, just to show that sort of commercial mixed context of the site. So, just to give a brief overview of the sort of history of the site and where we've got to, in terms of this application today. Historically, it's been used as an opticians at ground floor, with a residential flat at 1st and 2nd floors. So that's the lawful historic use. In 2020, a planning application was submitted for the change of use of the opticians and flat to a 6-bedroom house in multiple occupation. Now, that was approved planning permission in January 2021 with some conditions. Those conditions have since been partially discharged, and as such, that 6-bedroom HMO use can be implemented at any time during the lifetime of the planning application, of the planning permission, sorry, that 5-year period. So that is up until the 28th of January 2026. So when making an assessment of the current hostel application, officers are given significant weight to the fact that if permission were not approved for the hostel use, then the 6-bedroom HMO could be implemented at any point. There's just some minor internal alterations to reduce the bedrooms from 8 to 6. We're taking out 2 internal walls, and it could be used as a HMO, providing it's obviously got a licence from the licensing department. So internal renovations took place during 2021, and in September 2021, the applicant started using the property in its current format, which is as an 8-bedroom hostel. It has been used in this way up until the present day and is currently in use. So in September 2022, broadly a year after it started as a hostel use, a planning application was submitted, and it's been undertaken consideration to get to this point today. Can everyone see those plans okay? Otherwise, I can open up the PDF and try and zoom in. Okay. So at ground floor, on the left-hand side there, we've got 3 bedrooms at the front of the property. We've got a large sitting room with kitchenette and toilet and shower towards the rear. At the first floor, we've got a further 3 bedrooms with another toilet here, the main kitchen here, and an external access point onto an external stairs, marked as fire escape here on the plans. At second floor, we have 2 bedrooms and a large bathroom facility. So those are as on site at the moment, so it's a retention of what is there. In terms of the block plan, we've got the main property here with the 2-storey and single-storey extension. We've got the fire escape which comes down into a small outdoor amenity area with cycling and waste facilities. There is a garage and 2 parking spaces in a rear forecourt, which is accessed off Morden Road. So if we move on to sort of the assessment of the application, we've had some objections from neighbours, and some of these objections have raised concerns in relation to the sort of HMO use of the property. So just wanted to clarify the use and why we're assessing this as a hostel and not a HMO. So this is set out in the officer's report in further detail, but broadly speaking, there's a High Court judgment in 1985 which looks at the key characteristics and features of a hostel. So when we've looked at the way that this property is being used and sort of the key features and characteristics combined, it's been taken the view that this is a hostel and not a house in multiple occupation. The council's licensing team have also confirmed that from their point of view, it would not require a HMO is not a HMO for licensing purposes. However, building regulations would be required for the proposal. So in terms of the need for this accommodation, the Home Office National Transfer Scheme is a mandated process, and local authorities are required to source and provide suitable accommodation for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children at very short notice. So when the unaccompanied asylum-seeking child is allocated to Newport, they become looked after children under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act 2014. And Newport City Council becomes their corporate parent, so they have the responsibility for that child. In terms of this application, this site, the applicant has been managing the accommodation since September 2021, so for 17 months, on behalf of the local authority. And the local authority, so Children's Services, as part of the Social Services Department, have control over who is placed at the property. The accommodation effectively becomes the home for the child whilst their asylum application is processed. So the management company look after the day-to-day management of the property, which I'll touch upon now, but it is the local authority who have control over the residents of that and the occupants of that property. So in terms of the management, as I've mentioned, it's the local authority who place the occupants at the property, and it is the applicant, the management company, who manage the property. So the accommodation is the occupant's home whilst the application for their asylum is processed. In some cases, this can take up to 2 years, we've been told. So this isn't sort of a transient nature of occupants that are sort of changing on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. We understand from what we've been told from the applicant is that, broadly speaking, the 8 current occupants are largely the 8 original occupants that were there in September 2021. So it's not particularly a high turnover of occupants at the property. So a dedicated house manager visits the property on a daily basis to check the welfare of the tenants and also the condition of the property. The applicant is responsible for the maintenance and utilities of the property, and the cleaning team visits weekly. CCTV cameras operate in communal areas, and the applicant reports back to the council on a daily basis. So this hostel is for a specific category of people, and we have control as a local authority who goes in there. We've had sort of a management plan outlined by the applicant, which touches upon some of the key management and maintenance criteria that I've set out there. And that's been submitted, and we've recommended that this is controlled via planning condition, so that the specific, the way in which the hostel is being used in this nature, as it has been done for the last 17 months, is controlled via condition. So it isn't just sort of like an open hostel. So it's quite a specific use, and it's in accordance with that management plan. Moving on to the assessment of residential amenity, policy GP2 is the relevant local development plan policy, and this is sort of a twofold assessment. Firstly, the occupiers, the amenity of the occupiers of the property, but also the neighbouring residential amenity of neighbouring properties. So if you look at the occupiers first, having reviewed the layout as is on site, each room is considered to be of a sufficient size, layout, and has adequate space, light, natural ventilation and outlook. There is a large communal sitting room and kitchenette at ground floor, the main kitchen at first floor, and in total there are 3 toilets across the property, so 1 on each floor. There is limited external space provided to the rear of the property, but the site is within close proximity to Brecon Park and Glebeland Park, which are accessible on foot should any occupants desire to sort of, be entertained in the wider communal outdoor areas. The property is located opposite the Clean Road District Centre, which has a range of services and amenities that would be available for open use. In terms of the neighbouring residential amenity, there's no external alterations that have been proposed or undertaken at the property that would have an impact on neighbours. So, for example, there's been no new windows which would open up new views from the first and second floor over and above the existing residential use, because it was in residential use previously. And one of the key things, I think, we have had objections from neighbours who have raised concerns about possible impacts on their amenity should this use be approved. But one of the key things to note really is that this hostel has been operating in this way since September 2021. So that's for broadly 17 months. We haven't had any complaints to the planning department about its use. There's no record of objection on the environmental health records, and also environmental health have been consulted on the application and they've offered no objection. Gwent Police have been consulted and they have objected to the application due to possible issues of antisocial behaviour and crime. However, Gwent Police have also confirmed that in the duration that the property has been under use for the last 17 months as a hostel, there have been no reported crime or issues of disorder at the property. So overall, this sort of does indicate that the property is being managed in a satisfactory manner, and that there isn't any evidence of issues arising at the site that has been impacting local residents since it's been in use since September 2021. So moving on to highway safety and parking. Again, this is something that's arisen in objections from residents. Concerns about the fact that it's an 8-bedroom hostel and whether this would increase issues of parking demand in the area on street. Many of the residents and properties within Morden Road and the surrounding area are reliant on on-street parking, as they're terraces of properties without off-street parking. So it's important to look at the lawful use, what's been approved and what has been proposed. So the table sets that out. So the lawful use as an opticians at ground floor with 2-bedroom flat at first floor and second floor generates a parking demand in accordance with the SPG up to 7 spaces. Now the reason that says up to is because we've had to estimate the optician's use, because it obviously isn't in use at the moment. And the SPG looks at the number of employees. So based on the number of rooms and the size of it, we think they'd like, and the customers as well coming and going, we generate a parking demand for 5 spaces for the opticians and 2 spaces for the 2-bedroom flat. So that's 7 spaces. The approved use is a 6-bedroom HMO, 6 resident spaces, that's 1 space per bedroom, and then 2 visitor spaces, so that's 8 spaces in total. The proposed use, or the use as a hostel, as is, the parking demand as per the SPG is a total of 1 space. Now this is because there will be 1 parking space generated per 3 non-resident members of staff, and there's up to 3 non-resident members of staff that we've been told, so that's 1 space. Then in terms of the residents, due to the fact that it's a hostel and the nature of the residents, they wouldn't have vehicles, so there isn't any parking demand generated in terms of the residents. So it would be 1 space. So it's significantly less than the lawful use as has been used for many years, and also the approved HMO use, which could be undertaken and implemented should permission not be forthcoming for the hostel. So there's been a no objection from Highways. So those are the key considerations. In terms of the summary, just to reiterate the key points, the 8-bedroom hostel that's been sought permission has been operating in this way since September 2021. There's been no reports to planning regarding the use and no issues raised in this period as confirmed by Environmental Health. Whilst Gwent Police have objected due to possible concerns going forward, they've also confirmed that we haven't had any reports of crime or disturbance at the address during the duration of the hostel use since September 2021. We see that there is no evidence to support a robust reason for refusal in terms of the impact on neighbouring amenity, given the 17-month use and lack of issues that have been apparent. And just to reaffirm that the local authority has the control over who is placed and who resides at that address. So if there were issues with residents, then the local authority have that ability to replace and move and place new residents into the property. The management plan has been set out in the recommended conditions and sets out how the accommodation is to be managed and offers control over the specific operation that is taking place, because this is quite a specific hostel use. It's not just a general hostel use that people may think of hostels as being. So if permission isn't forthcoming for the hostel, then the property can be lawfully used as a HMO for 6 people in line with its planning permission, and this can be implemented up until the 28th of January 2026. And Highways have offered no objections in terms of highway safety or parking. So it is the officer's recommendation that the application is granted with conditions. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. Before we go to questions, we do have one ward member which would like to speak on this application. Councillor Howard.
Thank you very much, Chair. Unfortunately, Councillor Townsend couldn't be with us this morning, but she's asked me to make 3 points, if that's permissible, Chair. Will there be any oversight, and who will see the occupants are cared for and not exploited? I think the officer tried to answer that one. People in St Julian's, particularly in Killeen Road corridor, have had a lot to put up with over the recent years, with homes being turned into HMOs, with change in the character of the locality. The proposed hostel is not popular, and residents ask why a hostel rather than an HMO. So those were Councillor Townsend's words on that. Can I come to my own thoughts on this, please? I think I would kindly ask you to consider the reputation and the aims of the developer. They never had any intention of running this as an HMO. They came to you and asked you for permission to put in an HMO, and then they totally ignored it and they turned it into a hostel. So you have to question their motives and their future intentions. and what really is to stop them, although we have had explanation from the officer them putting even more people in there. There's been no proper noise assessment done at the time of the HMO because it was deemed to be not big enough for that, but I would suggest that it needs to be done. No, you want 8 people to be in there. And the limit on the age of the occupants. They're going to be there for 2 years, we're told. But if the UK government has its way, that will be a much shorter period of time if they get to grips with assessing immigrants. I'm worried, concerned about the young people with little support who will be put in there. We've heard that they can go to Brecon Park or they can go to the Gleelands. That's quite a long way away. And if it's raining, there are very few facilities in that area for young people. There is one youth club in the Methodist Church, but it doesn't have anywhere near the capacity to take on these young people. Now, there has been, I accept this anecdotal evidence of the young people who are in there at the moment hanging around and asking people if they can do some cash-in-hand jobs for them. And I can't blame the young people because they have very little money for entertainment, etc. And I do worry about them being exploited. You can see that the neighbours have been quite vociferous in this one, unusually so for any of these applications. There have been, and I refer you to 6.1, which clearly you can read for yourselves, but the existing parking issues, the officer again has tried to explain away. Concern regarding the intensification of the use of the property and concerns regarding the number of HMO properties within Morden Road. Concern regarding the status of the residents occupying the hostel and whether they will receive correct support management as required. That is clearly an issue for Newport City Council, but we haven't had any details of how the support will be given to these young people. And they've all come to us as vulnerable young people, however they've got to us. Going on to 7.2.2, a dedicated house manager visits the property on a daily basis. For how long? Carries out welfare checks. What pastoral support are they going to get in these very short visits? If I was told that there was a full-time member of staff resident of the property, I would put away a lot of these concerns. And it said that these young people are going to be there for perhaps 2 years, but it's only perhaps 2 years and no guarantee can be given to that. The fallback potential that it will become a HMO for 6 people seems a preferable outcome, and there would be room there for staff to be housed there, was it their wish. I'm worried about the vicinity, and the police have made objections about potential antisocial behaviour and the drugs trade that they've not mentioned. Morden Lane, which is more or less opposite, is a very narrow lane, and it's notorious for the drug trade and for antisocial behaviour. When we saw the slides earlier, you can see it as a very narrow lane to such an extent that Subway, who are on one side of the lane, have had to fence off the back of their property at some expense to ensure that this drug trade is curbed. But it nevertheless still exists within the area, and it's something I would ask you to consider. Now, I agree there's a lot of the planning issues have been dealt with, and it's a very long report for an establishment or a building such as this. But I would ask you, in all conscience, would you like your 15, 16, 70-year-old child to be placed in such an establishment for any real period of time? These are vulnerable young people, and they should have much better accommodation and much better provision than they're being offered via this hostel. So I ask you to reject this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Open the floor to question. Councillor Mogford.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit concerned, and I need an understanding of how this has been in operation for 17 months, and now it's suddenly come to planning. So perhaps you can explain that. Picking up on Councillor Hurahan's point about, from a social services point of view, we don't have anybody here from social services. So
Yes, we do.
sorry. Perhaps you could enlighten us and give a counterpoint to what Councillor Hurahan said, if that's okay. So they're my two issues for now. Thank you.
Okay.
So perhaps if I could just touch upon the current, the fact that it's being used, and then pass you over to Jay, who's from the social services team. So yeah, in terms of the use, so there are permitted development rights available for this sort of temporary type accommodation. This can be used without planning permission for a year, so up to a year, for 12 months, under the permitted development rights. So the use commenced in September 21. The application came in September 22. So that is broadly a period of a year. So that was fine. It could have been done without needing permission. Obviously, once the application comes into us and we have a valid application, we will obviously then consider it. So the use has been ongoing during the course of the consideration of this application, but obviously subject to a permission. So hopefully that just clarifies on that point. And then, yeah, perhaps if I could pass you over to Jay McCabe, who is from our social services department, to clarify any comments about that.
Sure. Okay, if it's okay, I'll come back to the very valid point about the support that's been provided. I think it's important to just say that obviously social services have a fundamental role in managing who these young people are that are going into the provision. And I think the key bit is obviously it's managed by a social work team. So we have case managers, social workers who are case managers. We also have young person's advisor. We have support workers. So these young people have an allocated worker who is responsible for their overall needs, if that makes sense. I think the key bit I just wanted to sort of come back to, and you made some really valid points about what additional support or activities, social engagement are they getting. There's quite a lot actually provided for these young people. So I just wanted to go through a couple of things. They're very, very heavily involved in, I don't know if you're aware of the GAP, which is a service that's currently in the community, and it primarily works with refugees, young people seeking asylum. So there's already an established social community network available. So they're part of that. There's also a lot of funding available. So in terms of finances, I'm genuinely surprised to hear that that you've heard information about young people asking for cash in hand jobs or scenarios such as that. And the reason being is that they're offered maintenance money. They receive money from the local authority, so they do actually have financial assistance. That covers their food, essential items, but there's also grant funding available that comes from the Home Office and through St David's Day, so from government. And what that means is if they have additional needs such as extra clothing, if they need bikes, as in bicycles, then we provide items such as that. If there are any specific needs, it's assessed on a case-by-case basis. But I've never experienced a situation where any of our young people have said that they have struggled financially or requested additional employment through cash in hand. So that's quite a surprise to me, and obviously I will have a conversation within my team to find out if there are any young people who are in that situation. The other thing I just sort of wanted to mention is that we do use some of our grant funding to support them to engage in activities. So a number of them are involved in one of the local football teams, and some of them are involved in local cricket. I don't know if you're aware, but obviously there are some very, very keen young people who are very good at cricket. And then the other part is, and I was just going to go back to the point about engaging them in community activities. So going back to the GAP, they have particular set days where they go in and they have food together and they congregate together. The other thing I just wanted to mention, in terms of the properties, a lot of the young people, for example, the Sudanese community, all tend to congregate together and they like to eat together. And the other point that I just wanted to come back to was the bit about any potential criminal activity. I oversee the Youth Justice Service, so I'm very aware of the young people that are involved in any criminal justice activities. And I'll be honest with you, the numbers are extremely low. I'm not aware of any UASCs that are currently involved in any criminal activity. We are absolutely, and you made a valid point about exposure, I guess, in terms of vulnerability, but I'm not aware of any UASC or young person currently, particularly within this provision, who are involved in any criminal exploitation or activity such as that. So it's just to reassure you, normally these young people will congregate together in groups. They tend to associate in safe spaces and places. I'm not aware, and just to confirm the information that Grant's given you, I'm not aware of any community disturbances or activities that would be causing us any concern. And the other point that I just wanted to highlight, and coming back to your valid point about the original process, I think from both our points of view, I mean, we've been working quite closely with planning recently, but when the property was first acquired, I think from a children's services perspective, we understood that it was a HMO, but obviously there's some technical processes that we're having to go through. So from our understanding, I think from a children's services point of view, we understood that it was a HMO originally, and that was the arrangement we were going into. So I hope that answers your questions.
Okay, do you want to come back?
Obviously, because you're wearing black, I didn't see you blend in so well.
Councillor Jordan? No? Councillor Harris? Sorry, Councillor Jones. I said Harris because I owe you a fiver and I forgot it.
Yeah, don't let him go. Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question for clarification, please. So we're saying these are young people. What age groups are we looking at? However, supplemental to that is, if they're going to be there for 2 years or, as my fellow councillor said, maybe longer, what age group do they get moved on? If they go there at 16, 17, they're there for 3 years, is it a cap at 18 or 17 and they have to move somewhere else? How does the system work on that, please?
Hi, Councillor Jones, sorry. So to answer your question, and actually that probably will respond to the concern, quite rightly, that was raised earlier, we don't place anybody under the age of 16 in these properties. So Newport has made the decision. I think Children and Young People Services have been very proactive in the sense that we have been working quite closely with the Home Office to identify that only 16 plus young people will come to Newport in order to try and provide the appropriate support that we can. So just to reassure you there. And then in terms of the life cycle, as I'm sure you can imagine, asylum applications are very difficult to sort of track. It's a case of we make the application, we support the young person through that journey, but sometimes they have to appeal, so sometimes there's potential delays, and that can last for a number of years. So from our perspective, young people can be in these provisions for 2 years, they can be there for longer. We wouldn't move any young person out of a provision until it was appropriate for them to do so. And normally it would be if they've been granted asylum, then we're in a better position to be able to identify appropriate accommodation for them in the longer term. And I guess from a children's services point of view, we want to ensure that our young people feel that they have a home. And I think that's really the approach, the philosophy that we've tried to take in terms of working with D2 around these provisions. We treat them as their home, not as a temporary space for the young person. So I think I just want to emphasise actually that we're really trying to take a compassionate response towards this. And really that's also why, in terms of our planning and consideration, we work with the Home Office to try and identify young people who can come over who already have established groups, so we can actually put them together, so effectively they can gel more effectively as a group, and obviously they're able to socialise, they can talk to people from their own language group, if that makes sense. So really, there's a lot of planning and thought going involved before we even identify the young people coming to Newport. But it's just to reassure you, I mean, we're committed to these young people, and some of them, I mean, at the moment we've got a young person who's about 20, who's with us at the moment, and he's still in one of the provisions that we've got. So we're in a situation where we have to work with the young person for as long as is required and is assessed. And I would say that in most of our cases, I mean, just to sort of say the service, the pathway service, we have an obligation, and there's guidance from Welsh Government that says that we need to be working with young people up until the age of 25. So from our point of view, the social work team and a young person's advisor will be working with some of these young people up until that age. So they're going to be with us for quite a long time. Does that answer your question?
Councillor Mockford?
Thank you, Chair, for a second session. I was a bit disturbed to hear about the proximity of the drug dealing to this facility and the potential, I suppose, that some of these youths get dragged into it or become users. That's clearly a problem for the police. How do you react to that situation? I mean, were you aware before? Now it's been brought to your attention. What's your feedback on that?
Sorry, I hope the mic's working again. Just to confirm, as I sort of said before, obviously within Children and Young People Services, we manage the child protection concerns as well. So if there were any concerns being shared, we would welcome those from members of the public if there are concerns that people have. Please feel free to refer in. I'm not aware of any specific cases, particularly in terms of the young people that we're working with, where they've been involved in substance misuse or selling of drugs. I do completely accept that there is a lot of gang activity in Newport, and it's something that we're working on at the moment, and I'm leading up on the contextual safeguarding approach within Newport, so it's a key piece of work we're trying to implement in terms of addressing the contextual risk, so any community-based risk, that's something that we're working on at the moment. But just to kind of reassure you, I'm not aware of any individual young people from the UASC cohort who've been involved in any substance misuse activity. If I'm made aware of that and people are aware of any individuals, please share that information with us as a department and we will act on that. And we do have a number of processes that we implement within Children's Services. We have a particular process called the Child Exploitation Toolkit process, and we will have regular meetings about particularly young people to identify plans to support them. But just to sort of reaffirm to you, I'm not aware of any individuals within this cohort, but if you are aware of any and you've got concerns, then you are very welcome to send those concerns through to me and I will make sure that they get taken forward.
Councillor Owls.
Thanks, Chair. I'm really pleased that we've had a response on this application from Gwen Police. Members will know that I've been driving for that for some time, and it does help us to make an informed decision on applications. I'm particularly concerned that effectively our social services team have been placing people into an unlicensed HMO which doesn't accord with the original planning permission because it's got 2 more bedrooms than it was actually consented for, and probably isn't a HMO and it's a hostel. And I know that there are permitted development rights, but to me that reputationally is really poor that we're now sort of coming and reconsidering applications 17 months down the line. When we assess applications, we take the police points on board and they'll normally give an indication of what they'll expect in the future. We're in a different position here because actually we've seen 17 months of actual on-the-ground intel that actually there isn't the problems that the police might expect at the moment in these properties. But that to me encourages people to flout the rules, do what they want, and then make retrospective applications and argue that there hasn't been a problem, so it's all okay. And that really concerns me, and I think that we need to think as departments and officers about how we work together to kind of make sure that that doesn't happen again, and that we're not looking at applications retrospectively and making decisions and risking the reputation of the council. Thanks.
Okay, I take that's a comment rather than a question. Okay, thank you. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'm disappointed in the planning department in regards to allowing it to be used as a hostel for 8 people over the last 6 to 8 months. I think that if they intend to come into a planning application, whether it be retrospectively, that should have stopped immediately. They shouldn't be allowed to carry on in regards to a hostel for 8 persons. The other thing is, how many hostels do Newport City Council have which is being monitored outside of Newport City Homes, outside the Newport City Council? Because at the moment we have homes and hostels which we look after children in, which are monitored 24 hours a day or have live-in accommodation for people to supervise those particular children. It really concerns me. These are vulnerable children and they're not being monitored 24 hours a day to look after. So what time the people going, social services going to go there? Are they going to go there 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, or is it going to be whenever? And who is going to monitor that and keep on top of that to make sure that these children are really looked after? Because that really concerns me, that they're vulnerable children that could stray quite easily without any monitoring.
Okay, thank you. I think the first part of your was with reference to you're upset about it becoming a hostel. The second part then became, I think, should be brought up outside this, not part of this planning. You brought up how many hostels we have in this in Newport. So it's not really part, you can ask that question to social services at another point. Andrew, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of, as I said, there are temporary permitted development rights that can be used, and that these have been used in this case. That is perfectly legitimate to do that. In terms of an enforcement perspective, we would only take enforcement action as a last resort when there's harm being caused. Now, in this case, the applicant submitted an application, and we are considering that before you today. And similarly, the use has been operating without any harm being caused to residents. Residents weren't aware that this property was being used as a hostel until the planning application was submitted. So we wouldn't have any identified planning harm to take any action from an enforcement perspective. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, anything else?
Yes, Chair. Can I come back on that? If another application is put in, yet it's being used for other purposes, should we say, I don't know, let's say a traveller's site, for instance, yet there's a traveller's site on there, there's no harm to it, yet it's a retrospective planning application, then we have to allow it. Is that the way it goes? Because I am concerned about the amount of retrospective planning applications that this council is actually letting go through. I think it, you know, somebody needs to step up to the plate and start stopping these developments.
With planning legislation, we can only taking formal enforcement action is always ever a last resort. So it always results in negotiation in the first instance, unless a proposal is so unacceptable straight off the bat in planning terms that we have to take action. And we've done that. We brought a report to you last month that went to the Governance and Audit Committee, where we served an enforcement notice and a stop notice. So we did that, and we will do it where it's necessary. There's nothing in planning legislation that prevents someone submitting a retrospective application. That is undertaken at their own risk. They might not get permission for it. In this case, as I said, we consider everything on a case-by-case basis. So just because an application is retrospective doesn't mean it should go against it. The applicant's taken the risk. Members might not consider it to be acceptable. But in this instance, it's been operating for 17 months, and we're satisfied that in planning terms, we've got the appropriate regulatory control to ensure that it does operate in a safe and acceptable manner. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Watkins, you also brought up in your points that you was concerned about how often these young people were visited and what times a day. Could you bring that up, please?
I hope it's okay as well, just to sort of address the other point in terms of working more closely together. Just to confirm, obviously, from our perspective, I've only been in post since June or July of last year, and I'm going through this journey in terms of understanding the complexity. So just to reassure you, we are working closely together now, and we're having a regular meeting, I think it's quarterly at least, to discuss any future planning considerations. So I just want to reassure you that if we are in a situation where we're wanting to explore future accommodation options, we're working very closely with planning to make sure that that's happening. So just to let you know that that is definitely taking place. The other bit, just to confirm, I think is it Councillor Watkins? I hope I pronounced your surname correctly. In terms of support, these young people are usually seen pretty much on a daily basis, and it is assessed on an individual need. Some young people will need more support, some young people don't. And the other thing I just wanted to make clear is a number of cases, a lot of them are engaged in education and training. So they're all on ESOL programs, so there's obviously learning English. So that's a fundamental part. So we have to consider, what the life of a 16 to 18-year-old is going to look like. So if they're going to be in college or training, we normally then try and visit or fit in times where it'll be more suitable to them. So yes, some of them do get seen first thing in the morning, and sometimes some of them will be seen towards the end of the day. We actually have to manually deliver money to young people at the moment because, as you can imagine, they come to the country and they don't always come with a bank account. So we have to set up those facilities for them. And usually then what we end up doing is, as a department, we will go out and see the young person. We deliver cash to them. There's lots and lots of welfare checks taking place. But as I said also, we've got a situation where we support a couple of the young people to attend cricket in the evening. So the staff team that I have are very committed to the young people, and they will do that out of their usual working hours. So it's just to say to you, there is always somebody having contact with these young people. And I have to say, they're a very, very vocal bunch. So if they need support or they want something, they will contact our staff very regularly. We are contactable by text, by phone, and also the house supports and that. So if there are any issues, there's a lot of regular feedback going on. And it's usually for items. So young people usually want support with a particular item, or they want to access an event, or they want to go and do something. But I have to say, in 99% of the cases, usually we will respond very, very quickly, because obviously it's assessed on a needs basis. And that's why we developed and set up a particularly specialised immigration social work team, so we could concentrate our energies and ensure we're meeting their needs properly.
I'll come back, Councillor Watkin.
Yes, Chair, if I may. Who actually monitors that? Do the Home Office visit at all? Because obviously they are placing the vulnerable children within Newport. So do they come down and visit to make sure everything is being monitored correctly?
Okay, so in terms of process, in the beginning stages, we have Home Office interviews. So when young people make their asylum claim, they have to be interviewed by the Home Office. But obviously, as soon as that claim, I mean, as you can imagine, they have contact with solicitors, they have contact with a number of departments. There's regular contact, but in terms of Home Office involvement, it will usually be through communication via us as a department to them as their applications are being tracked. There is an interview, but then once their asylum status has been granted, usually it's minimal input. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Councillor Jenkins.
My concern is also about the children. We keep saying children, yet they're being left overnight. You know, they're being left to their own devices all through the night. Surely a child at 16 years of age should have a carer who's there right through the night, just in case there's an issue. I just can't see how you're saying children and then they're just being left to their own devices.
I do accept the fact that the term child does bring with it certain connotations, but I just want to emphasise the point that actually we're talking about young people. These are young people from 16 onwards. And actually, just to be very, very clear, it's not just UASCs. We're talking about the full care leaver population here. And in Newport, we provide support to a number of 16-pluses. As I'm sure you're aware, we have homelessness young people from 16. We do have our fundamental cohort, which is young people who've been in care and then want to leave care. Some of them want to leave at 16 and have been in residential or foster care. I think the point that I want to make here is it's assessed on an individual needs basis. So I'll give an example. We had a couple of UASCs who arrived who weren't appropriate or suited to being in a D2 provision or an independent provision, and they did go to a foster placement. So it's just to be super, super clear here, it's done on a needs-assessed basis, and we have to work out which young people are appropriate and ready to be in this setting. We don't just place young people. We do have to assess their need, and that's all part of the initial journey. So obviously, as you can imagine, with both planned and unplanned presentations, we have to assess these young people. It usually takes two professionals. There's two social workers doing that piece of work, and then we determine primarily where their level of ability is, and part of it is an ongoing assessment. And obviously, this is subject to review. So if a young person is in one of the properties and isn't coping, and we've had that too, then we will identify an alternative solution for them. And it might be residential, it might be a foster placement, it might be a when I'm ready placement. And I'm sure, as you're aware, obviously I've attended one of these meetings before with you. We've talked about trying to expand the accommodation offer. As you can imagine, Newport's quite difficult to do that with because accommodation is scarce. It's a very saturated city, but we're focusing on aspects such as supported lodgings. And I want to try and grow that service, but as you can imagine, these things take time.
Okay. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question again, sorry. Will it be females and males in the same property at the same time, staying there? And will they all come from the same sort of country or origin, or is it going to be mixed, just in case there's a clash of any sorts?
Again, very valid question, and thank you for asking. So, no, the boys and girls are separated, so they're in different provisions. And to go back to your point about the ethnic origin, we try and group them effectively. So, as you can imagine, we've got some Sudanese, Afghan communities. What we try and do is identify before they come to Newport which particular ethnic groups we have already established, and then we try and identify and ask for those. So that's about pre-planning. And I guess the point that I wanted to sort of share with you is that, as you can imagine, the Home Office is mandating this. So what we're trying to do is effectively take a little bit more control back, so that we're not forced with the Home Office saying this is the young person that you have to take, not really understanding necessarily their needs, the ethnic communities that they're in, necessarily the gender. We're trying to identify a way to develop a little bit more proactive control as best as we possibly can. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just a bit more of maybe a clarification. What are you classing as a young person? Because you're talking 16 years of age, it could be classed as an adult, 18 classed as an adult, and if it's over 18, can they be left at home devices and actually leave the premises themselves? You know, I've looked online with the Gwent Police. There's been over 19 incidents recorded since December of antisocial behaviour, drug abuse, vehicle crime. You know, I'm a bit concerned. You know, what you're classing as young person, as an adult, as it come in your remit to yourself, or will I go to adult services as well?
Sorry, make sure it's on all valid questions. From my perspective, I mean, as you've quite rightly highlighted, we work to a number of different legislative frameworks. So Social Services and Wellbeing Act is one piece of legislation. There's the Children's Act. Appreciate, in terms of looked after status, we call our children and young people. I identify 16 plus as young people because they start to have capacity. They make decisions for themselves, and it doesn't matter if they're a looked after child or they're living at home with their family. I think you'll all be aware that young people from the age of 16 start to vote with their feet, and they make decisions on their own. We may not necessarily support those decisions, and we may not be necessarily happy that they make some risky decisions, but I think it's the nature of development and adolescence. So just to be clear, from my perspective, we're talking about 16 plus, and be really, really clear that we're talking about a population or a cohort of young people from 16 plus. But I take your point, at 18 they are classed as adults. Sometimes, and I'll be really honest with you, I think we've talked about this in social services a number of times, risks don't suddenly disappear just because the young person turns at 18. You can still have extremely vulnerable 18-year-olds. And that goes back to your point about including adult services where appropriate, and we operate an independent living panel where we identify who the young people are that are going to require support post-18 and will need adult services input. That's usually why we have a number of planning meetings to ensure that the young people that we're most concerned about are getting the support that they need, even through to adulthood. So there are processes, just to reassure you. Obviously, I mean, just to sort of be clear, I'm part of some working groups at the moment. I don't know if you're aware that the police and social services are working closely. We've got the MACE process, which sits under Safer Newport. There are a number of different strands which are currently looking at how we can support our more vulnerable people, particularly those that are potentially exposed to exploitation. And we're trying to identify how to support those that are going through transition. So it's even working with young people up to the age of 20 plus. So just to reassure you, I think we're very aware that we are still working with young people and they're still very vulnerable. I prefer not to use the term child because at 16 they like to be referred to as young people where they are making decisions for themselves. And I think the most important, bit I guess to come back to is that's why we have a dedicated service whose job it is to work with adolescents, because adolescence requires a different approach, and we have to respect that young people need to make decisions for themselves.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. Is going back to what Councillor Hourain said about the antisocial behaviour and drug dealing. If one of these young people in your care are involved in this, I'd just like to know how you deal with it and what the consequences are. Thank you.
Apologies if I hadn't been clear enough, and thank you for asking the question again. There are already existing processes that we go through. Now, obviously within Children and Young People Services, we have an exploitation team, a dedicated exploitation team that works specifically, focuses on children and young people who are at the risk primarily of edge of care, but also at risk of exploitation. We have existing processes that occur. So as you can imagine, we might get a safeguarding referral coming in, and we have a process which is called the CE process, and that's set up, and we then review and monitor a specific child or young person's plan. And that could be up to the age of 18, so I completely accept the point. The risk doesn't just stop, as soon as they turn 16. We have those risks, on an ongoing basis. But it's monitored and reviewed, and we have attendance from multi-agency partners, so police, health. We have St Giles. There are a number of agency partners around those. They're almost a bit like a strategy meeting. It's a strategy meeting where you're discussing the child's plan or the young person's plan, and then usually we talk about how we can develop interventions to address that. But the other end of the spectrum, which you're referring to quite rightly, is also the criminal activity. I oversee the Youth Justice Service, so I'm responsible for the children and young people that are also known to that service, and we are working on making our offer even more proactive. So we offer quite a large preventative offer within the service. And what we're trying to do is identify young people earlier on in the journey, and that's not just children and young people in care, that's young people in communities who are receiving care and support, or those not even known to social services, to try and identify ways to support them at a much earlier stage. So we're really focused on prevention and diversion, really. That's our main focus. But obviously, if there are concerns, or communities or members have got any issues about any particular young person, then please send that information through, and we will act on that straight away. But there is a dedicated system in place to manage exploitation, specifically so criminal exploitation, sexual exploitation, and that could be the young person being the perpetrator or the victim.
Okay, Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to come back on the application itself then, we know we've got a first floor fire escape. On the bedrooms upstairs, is there anything for that upstairs, or will that come under building regulations and for access for fire?
It would come under building regulations, and this proposal will need building regulations.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Watkins.
I'm referring to page 22 of the application, Chair, items 726 and 727. As we've been told by the officers, that it's now being used as an 8-bed hostel. If that's the case, why has no enforcement action been taken or recommended to be taken according to Building Controls team? They've reviewed the proposal and confirmed the proposal does require building regulations, and no such application has been submitted to date. The applicant has been advised that this is a building control team can seek to take enforcement action if no application in the forthcoming should be applied for. So why is it being used over the last 6 to 8 months as an 8-bedroom hostel, yet no enforcement by building control team has taken place? Thank you.
Once again, Councillor, building control, in terms of enforcement, it has to be in the public interest, and we have to be aware of an issue. Our building control team have spoken to the owners of the property, have arranged a site meeting, and have made them aware that building control, building regs would be required for this proposal. The applicant has advised that obviously they're going to wait until this application is determined, but they are liaising with us. And as I said, if they are not forthcoming, then we can take action if it's necessary.
Please do.
Can we put that as a condition of this application then, please?
We can't, Councillor, because it's controlled by separate legislation, so it wouldn't meet the test of a condition. But building control are also within my portfolio, so I can ensure that we do progress that in an expedient manner.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for your attendance and your knowledge on this. Thank you. Thank you. I think also, Jay, if you mind me saying, there was 1 or 2 points. I know Councillor Watkins brought up 1 or 2 points. If he wants to write to you on them points, then you will answer them. Okay? Okay, thank you. Okay, going to the proposal then. The proposal is for changing use from office and self-contained flats to a hostel for 8 persons. And this has been granted with conditions. Could I ask for a proposer for this proposal, please? Proposed by Councillor Errol, seconded by Councillor Markford. All those in favour? Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Thank you for all your inputs. Okay. Okay, we now move on to item number 2. This will be presented by Grant again, 221019.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Here we go. Okay, so this application is for at Furbankdale Social Centre, Heather Road. It is retrospective, an application for retrospective change of use of part of an allotment to a nursery play area, including viewing platform and access platform with steps. It is recommended that the application is granted with conditions. So an application of this scale and nature would normally be determined under delegated powers. However, the application is brought to Planning Committee as the applicant is related to a member of staff within the Planning Department, so in line with policies and procedures, it needs to be determined at the Planning Committee, not delegated powers. So the application site is the social centre at the Furbankdale Social Centre and Tennis Courts. So this is the social centre here, this rectangular single-storey building. It was built as a social centre post-World War II and remains in place. It's been in sort of a social use ever since. Since 2012, it has been occupied by a nursery. So in terms of the planning use class of a social centre and a nursery, they're the same planning use class. They're D1, which is non-resident institution. So there was no requirement to change the use first and foremost in 2012 when the nursery occupied the building. So the general hours of operation of the nursery are 9 till 3, but they do offer a breakfast club from 8 o'clock, and there's also an after-school facility. The latest departure would be 6 o'clock. So the building itself and the allotment area, as you can see here, is all under lease from the applicant, by the applicant, sorry, from Newport City Council. That has been confirmed by the Council's Environment and Leisure Contracts Manager. So in terms of the site, this is the building, as I mentioned. We've got a small external. We've got a plan that'll show you this in more detail in a moment. There's an external space here for children to play in, and the red area is what has been extended from that existing play area. There's allotments in this sort of broadly triangular area. Then there's tennis courts at slightly higher level with Heather Road. So we've got Carlton Road and the residential properties that front on Carlton Road. They've got long rear gardens that share a boundary along the rear allotment of the site here. So in terms of the new play area, or the play area that has been extended, that's outlined in red. It's 15 metres wide by 6 metres in depth. It extends from the rear of the existing play area, as you can see demarcated on the plan there. So these are some site photos from the visit. It is retrospective. It's currently there, so what is being sought permission is what is currently on the ground at the moment. So on this first photo, I'm stood at the rear boundary of the extended play area, looking back towards the main building. We've got this raised platform here, some play equipment, and the raised steps with a slightly extended raised platform here. So these require permission because they're raised platforms effectively, so they require consent for that point of view. And then also what we've got is the enclosed play area, as you can see, enclosed by the fencing. So that's the 6 metres depth by 15 metres wide. So that was used as part of the allotment, but now it's been incorporated into that nursery play area, which is why there's a change of use in that land. Some more photos. So the first one, again, I'm stood here in that play area, looking back towards the main building. So as you can see, there's an embankment down, and the extension of that sort of play area is at a lower ground level. So it's lower. It's a couple of metres lower than the existing height of the existing play area. And the photo on the right-hand side is taken from the edge of the play area, looking across the allotments towards the rear boundaries of the rear gardens of Carlton Road and the properties along there, which you saw on the plan earlier on. So, in terms of the assessment of the application, an allotment is considered to be a community facility as per Planning Policy Wales, Edition 11. So therefore, as it is considered to be a community facility, albeit in this instance it's a private venture because it's under the private lease of the social centre, the change of use means that policies SP12 and CS12 are relevant to the determination of the application. So these policies consider the impact on existing community facilities. So overall site, including the allotment, is leased by the applicant from Newport City Council, and there's therefore a degree of control in terms of the long-term impact of the change of use. So it would only result in a 90 square metre loss of allotment space, which isn't currently in active use. In the event that there is future demand or that the play area is required to be reverted back to allotment because there's an uptake or there's a change in the lease, for example, that NCC, as the freeholder, do have that control to revert it back if necessary. So that offers us some assurance in terms of the longer-term impact on the community facility. So it is considered that the change of use of the play area doesn't have any adverse impact on the existing community facility, or it doesn't prejudice any possible future use as an allotment. It's fairly light touch. It could be reverted back if necessary. So we consider it compliant with the aims of SP12 and CF12. Moving on to policy CE4, this looks at environmental spaces and corridors. So on the plan that you can see here, this is the allotment, this is the main building and the play area, this is the tennis courts. Everything highlighted in green is allocated as environmental space. So because the application takes, the change of use is taking place within the environmental space, policy CE4 is relevant. We've looked at the sort of more of an in-depth assessment of the criteria of policy CE4. Apologies, it is CE3, not CE4. That's an error on the title, but the CE3 is referred to on the text there. So it's considered that this minor extension into the allotment area wouldn't result in any adverse impact on the environmental space. I mean, the land is the existing uses environmental space. It's proposed to still be maintained as the environmental space that could be reverted. So we're not, we don't think there's any adverse impact on that. Looking at the impact on residential amenity, policy GP2 is relevant. Now we've had 3 or 4 objections from neighbours living along Carlton Road, as you'll see in the officer's report. The nearest residential properties and the only ones really sort of that could be impacted at all are along Carlton Road that you can see in the photograph here. Concerns have been raised by neighbours regarding noise and disturbance. However, this is an extension of an existing play area. It's not considered, or we don't consider it to result in any adverse impact on neighbouring amenity over and above the existing lawful use. It's grass, so it won't be sort of used all the time in adverse weather conditions, which will be quite typical in the winter. It's not lit, so it won't be used early morning or towards that 6 o'clock after school club threshold in the winter because it'll be dark. So the hours of use are generally considered to be daytime acceptable hours. The extension of the external play area doesn't result in any additional children numbers at the use. They can't take on more children because they've got a larger external area. They're still limited in terms of the inside space of what they can do. The raised platform that I'm stood on when I've taken this photograph and looks towards the rear of those properties is located between 20 and 25 metres from the rear boundaries of the properties. Having undertaken a site visit, I've determined there's no harmful impact in terms of privacy or overlooking. We've consulted with Environmental Health and they've offered no objection to the proposal. In terms of the quality of design, GP6 is relevant. I mean, it's quite minimal in terms of what's been sort of built, but the extended area is at a lower level, as you saw from some of those earlier photos. It has a low visual impact with limited to no public visibility in public areas. The raised platform and steps are sort of set against the backdrop of the existing building at that lower level, blending it in. And the sort of the timber materials are generally considered to be acceptable. So we do consider that it's compliant with the aims of policy GP6. And then I think the final point, some concerns have been raised from local residents in relation to parking, and there being parking issues in the area. It's close to a comprehensive school, so at drop-off and pick-up times, peak parking times, there may well be an issue. I can't sort of comment on that really. But what we can say is that the extension of this play area doesn't contribute to any additional parking demand when assessed against the parking standards SPG, and the highways officer has confirmed that there's no highways impact as a result of the proposal and has offered no objection. So overall, officers have considered the application against the relevant LDP policies as listed, and there's no adverse impact or there's no nothing contrary to these policies that we've assessed, and we recommend that the application is granted with conditions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Graham. We don't have any public speakers on this. Councillor Linton, does anybody else like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can see I'm not against anything with the children and a play area or any addition to this. However, looking at it, it seems the common area of land is being encroached on illegally, it's been taken over. This is where it's coming back retrospectively. What stops all the other boundaries of the rear gardens of the periphery of the houses doing exactly the same? What would happen if I wanted to take my bit of garden back another 4 foot into this common land, which is common land, used for everybody?
Sorry.
And I can also see that it's not being used as such at the minute for allotment space. So why are we still allowing somebody to use this land, and why is it not setting a precedent for the other houses in the area?
So firstly, in terms of the encroachment from the nursery onto the land, they do have a lease over that land, so they do have control over that land, albeit it's a change of use from the allotment use to the external play area. That is a change of use that requires planning permission. I think they thought because they had the lease, they were able to sort of extend that area. Obviously, once it was brought to our attention, an enforcement case was opened, investigated, an application invited, and this is where we are today. So yes, it's retrospective, but that's sort of where we are today. With regards to your comment about the neighbours, quite simply, again, it would be a change of use. If a neighbour wanted to extend their residential curtilage into the allotment area, that would require planning permission. It would be a change of use of that allotment land. So again, if that was undertaken and reported to us, then obviously we'd have to investigate it through our enforcement team. If someone come to us and said, can I extend my garden, we'd tell them they require planning permission to do so.
Can I just clarify, the lease covers the whole of that land area? Is that right?
So the lease, the applicant has a lease on the social centre and the allotment land behind it.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. The proposal then is retrospective change of use of parts of allotment to nursery play area, including viewing platform and access platforms with steps. This has been granted with conditions. Could I please have a proposer for the proposal? Councillor Jordan, seconder. Councillor Perkins. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. The third one will be presented by Steve Williams, and this is application number 220656, and our favourite. Thank you.
Nothing's okay with it, it's unbelievable. Okay. This application relates to 19 Temple Street. The site comprises a two-storey residential dwelling with 3 bedrooms, and the proposal is to change the use of the property to a 4-bedroom house in multiple occupation. And the application has been called to committee by Councillor Adan. So these are the existing floor plans. So the plan on the far left is the ground floor as existing, and that's not really going to change. The next plan along, so second from the left, is the existing proposed existing first floor plan. So the alterations on this is that in the rear annex, a storage room is going to change to a shower room, and then the bathroom is going to change to a bedroom. And the result is that there will be 4 bedrooms on the first floor rather than 3. Not much in the way of changes to the elevations. So these are the existing elevation drawings, and the only real change is on the rear, where you can see a small, in the bottom left there, you can see a small lean-to structure, which is a cycle store. So in terms of the issues, there's the elevation drawings of the cycle store look. So the property that we're looking at is the property behind the tree there in the photograph. And then just to take some photographs of the street, so you can see there's sort of parking bays along the road. So in terms of the issues, primarily the application has to be assessed against policy H8 of the local development plan. And that sets out a number of criteria, as you can see there. First is the scale and intensity doesn't harm the character of the building or the locality and would not cause an unacceptable impact on amenity for neighbours or result in on-street parking problems. The second is it doesn't create an over-concentration in the area. Third, noise insulation, and fourth, amenity for future occupiers. So running through those issues, in terms of character and amenity, the use would accommodate 4 persons, which is not out of character with the existing property as a domestic dwelling. The internal arrangements of the rooms doesn't create any significant amenity issues. All the bedrooms are upstairs as existing, and the rooms downstairs don't alter. So it's not considered there's any amenity issues for neighbours in terms of requiring any soundproofing. In terms of parking, so the parking supplementary planning guidance sets out that an existing dwelling has a parking demand of 3 parking spaces, and the proposed use would have a parking demand of 4, so there's an increase in demand by 1 space. Now, it's not possible, because it's a terrace property, it's not possible to provide any parking within the curtilage of the site. But from the photographs, you can see that there is unrestricted communal parking along the road. The site is in a sustainable location. It's very close to the district centre in Pill. So it's got easy access to bus stops, various facilities such as a supermarket and a school. So it's very, very sustainable. The application has been supported by a parking survey. And the results there of that parking survey there on the screen for you. So perhaps right at the end you can see the blue column, which is looking at what sort of parking stress is within the area. And you can see that on the various dates that they undertook the survey, the amount of space that was left was well short of 100%. I mean, the levels were between 40, well,
about 30% and 40%. So we don't consider that there's the additional one parking space demand is going to cause a problem. And the highways officer has checked through that parking assessment and is in agreement, has no concerns on parking grounds. So in terms of the issue of over-concentration, not sure why that's gone off. There you are, it's back. Right, so the application site is within the house in multiple occupation threshold area. Therefore, what we have to do is take a 50-metre radius of the site and determine what proportion of properties is or are HMOs. And the threshold is 15%. So anything over 15% causes potential concerns in terms of over-concentration. As you can see from that slide, there are no other HMO properties within that blue circle there. The closest are in Commercial Road. So this would be the first HMO within that area shown there, which would represent, out of the 23 properties within that blue circle, it's only 4.34%, obviously well short of 15%. So it doesn't breach the 15% threshold, so we have no grounds to argue that there's an over-concentration of HMOs. Final issue is flooding. The site is within flood zone B, but within the flood zone 3 of the new flood maps. So we did ask the applicant to undertake a flood consequence assessment, which has been done, and that's been run past Natural Resources Wales, and they've got no objection. And the reason they've got no objection is that there's no increase in vulnerability. So initially, when the application came in, the applicant was proposing to have a bedroom on the ground floor. And for Natural Resources Wales, that's a problem because it's increasing the number of, well, it's introducing bedrooms on the ground floor, so people could be caught unawares whilst they're sleeping. So the applicant dropped the number of bedrooms down to 4 and has agreed to only have the bedrooms on the upper floor. So that obviously is outside of the flood zone. The flooding depths would be 690 millimetres. So obviously that's not going to reach anywhere near the first floor. So that's not a problem for us. So we're not having we're not raising any concerns of flood risk grounds, but we are putting a planning condition on to restrict the number of bedrooms at the property to 4 and to ensure that no bedrooms could be provided on the ground floor. So we're recommending planning permission be granted subject to that condition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's no public speakers to this, so we'll open up for questions. Councillor Jones?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Is it possible to go back to the slide earlier where you showed the front of the terraced houses with the bins outside the front? It was a couple of pages back. That would be fine. The one you just went past, you just go forward again, please. Just go forward, sorry, to the actual picture of the terraced house.
Right.
Can you, so with the bins at the front, you said this one on the report on 7.7.1 on waste, it says that there's additional rear garden area to serve for the general refuge for the increase in occupants. Now, looking at the property there, that's a terraced house. How does that deem to be useful when there's no back gate or to the front, because there's curbside collection at the front? So you can see the bins laid out the front there, and yet in this planning it says additional waste has been prepared by refuge area at the back of the property. So are we saying there's going to be bins at the back that come through the house on a daily basis or weekly basis?
Well, it's the same situation for all the properties there. All the properties have to store their waste.
But this is a HMO, first one in this area, and look at the terrace house there. Those bins are sat outside the houses by the other residents. Now we're going to have a multiple usage on this HMO on this one. So just going by what they're reading here, they say the proposal includes a separate area in the rear garden to serve as a general refuge and recycling area. But surely, hygiene-wise, that's not healthy because you're going to be bringing all that general waste through the house for the collection at the front, and yet the neighbours already living there could be 3, 4, 1 person in that house, got the bins out on the front already. So reading that paragraph there, I'm quite concerned that the waste is going to be at the back for the additional usage, but it's going to have to come through the house. So from a health and safety point of view, I must admit I'm not happy with that.
Yeah, I don't know when this photograph was taken, but you can see the bins are there for all the properties, even the dwellings. The number of occupants would be restricted to 4. So it's not out of keeping with the number of occupants you'd see in a domestic dwelling. There could be, in a property this size, there could very easily be a family of 4 living in one of these properties. So you haven't really got a significant increase in the number of people. Yes, the idea would be that the bins would be stored until bin day. The bins would be stored in the rear garden, and then brought through on bin day. I mean, that's the situation for all the occupiers there. They haven't got any other option, really.
Well, to be fair, I must admit that obviously you do your work well, and just reading that, though, I would be troubled at the fact that this is actually allowed into the application, and we understand it's most likely doesn't mean a thing, because they'll be just putting their bins and rubbish at the front, like all the other neighbours will be. And that passage there is really being a bit misleading, because will they use it, won't they use it, health and safety coming back and through. But my final point is relevant, really, because we're going on to a proposed free weekly cycle collection. So the refuge is going to increase even greater. So my concern is with HMOs is the rubbish that they generate. Yes, it could be 4 people living next door, but I don't like that passage. I don't think it reads well. It doesn't serve any purpose. And bearing where we're going with the council shortly, I think our waste management should be high concern to everybody in an HMO. So I just want it to be considered that I am not happy with that passage writing, and I'm not happy the way we're going to go with the refuge on that area, for that particular HMO in that area, I'm afraid.
Councillor Jenkins.
Well, again, I'd just like to say that there's people already living in the house, so it's already being used as a HMO.
Sorry, did you say it's already being used?
It's already being used as a HMO. There's already people living in there. There's been 38 objections. And then on 7.9 about crime, even though we haven't, you put on there the statistics about crime. So, for instance, there's 370 reports of crime in that area, and you said the average number of the rest of Newport is 205, so that's an extra 160 at least in that area. So to say that residents are concerned, I totally understand. So for extra pressure just to be put in that area is just crazy.
So yeah, carry on, yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to say. Also, in Pill, we have a local lettings policy, which was brought out in September 2022. So this is because the police and the council and everybody else realise the issues that are there already. So the police are looking into finding out about residents before they're put into the properties. So why is this one any different?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we put that information in there for you to take into account, the crime figures. But as I explained earlier in the presentation, we've got the supplementary planning guidance on houses and multiple occupation, which helps us build a case where we think there is one, to sort of prove that we feel that the use of the property might be sort of causing harm to the character of the area, issues of the social cohesion of the area. So obviously in this case there are no other HMOs within the 50-metre radius. So without that sort of policy backing, it's going to be very difficult to prove that this proposed use would, despite those, the general crime levels in the area, it would be very difficult to prove that this proposal would cause harm to social cohesion to an extent that we could, justify refusing it.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Watkins?
Yes, Chair. On page 37, item 765, I think it's 765, NRW, where is the communal area for the purpose of emergency refuge? Is that on the first floor or on the ground floor?
Right, can you see that? So the upper floor consists of bedrooms and obviously a landing. So in this case, there is no sort of communal area to gather because they've all got accommodation to be in. So the communal area would be necessary if there was a flooding incident and you literally had nowhere to be. You would know where to go. You can't escape the floodwaters. In this case, they're all upstairs in their living space. So they're outside of those floodwaters. They've got that sort of refuge inbuilt in terms of their room. That's what I.
Sorry, yeah. Can I just add to that? Sorry. The NRW comments with regards to the refuge area, like you've had in other HMOs previously, relate to applications when bedrooms are proposed at ground floor. So originally, when this application was first submitted, there was a bedroom at ground floor level when they commented on the authority needing to be satisfied that there was appropriate refuge. The application was amended to obviously remove the ground floor bedroom, and therefore that comment about refuge falls away because everyone can store their own, everyone can sleep at first floor level in a safe and acceptable manner, can store their personal possessions in the room. So the comment about the refuge has come in earlier on and been included inaccurately in the report. So apologies for the confusion.
Chair, so there's no bedrooms on the ground floor?
No bedrooms on the ground floor as proposed and conditioned.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jones, want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, going forward, HMO technically is a business because it's a rental property and such. And with our green issues and recycling and landfill waste, can you just clarify to myself, are we looking to ask these people on HMOs going forward to have private waste collection and pay for it? Or is it still a council commitment that it comes within residents into the taxation?
It wouldn't be a planning issue, Councillor. Same as any other property could be rented out for business purposes to a family.
Councillor Jordan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Could we just drop the picture down a bit, please, so I can see a bit further up? So on this far side here, then, that's where the new bedroom's going to be. Originally, that's the bathroom on the bathroom was the old side. So what size is that bedroom then, for that size there? Because if that's a bathroom, I can't see it really being a good size for a living space.
You've got some big bathrooms, right?
And is it actually the house itself? Is it actually really a 4-bedroom house or no? Respect me first.
Right. Can't quite make that out, it's a bit blurred, but I think it's about 6.5 square metres.
And is that an acceptable size for a bedroom?
Yeah, the officer's report does go into this in terms of obviously the guidance on internal space for HMOs in terms of adequate space. And it's not just a space standard, obviously. It's about having appropriate light outlook, etc. And the bedroom has been considered to be an acceptable size.
The room sizes is covered by licensing and environmental health.
Okay, are there any other questions? Can I just bring up one point which Councillor Jones made about the refuge out the back, and I accept what you say about the wording. However, I got a relative who lives in a terrace house, and they do have a storage area out their back, but usually they keep the main refuge bin out the front, and their recyclable boxes, which are clean refuse, are out the back. So maybe that's what it...
Sorry, Chair, yeah, I appreciate your feedback on that. It was just because the passage in there outlining such in detail where the recycling was going to be kept and the waste was, it's a bit misleading. It seems a bit of a gloss paint over...
No, all we could do, Councillor, is ensure there's provision there for refuge. We can't insist that someone uses it like with any property.
I understand that, but being a councillor on planning, I have a right to just read that and say, my interpretation is that it's a bit glossy and it just seems to be, oh, this looks good on paper to get it through. So that's my interpretation, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there's no further questions. So the proposal, change of use from dwelling, C3 to a 4-bed house in multiple occupation. Could I please have a proposer for the proposal? Councillor Mogford, second. Councillor Howells. All those in favour? Those against? Passed unanimously. Thank you. The last item then is appeals decision page 43, which is for information only. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I shall see you all